Hello on the Daily Fam. Welcome back to the show. In this episode, I'm talking about the Pisces North Node transit that happened on January 11th, and it will go for about a year and a half, which is excellent for all of us. I'm going to talk about what that means, but I also decided that I'm not going to just talk about it in terms of how I normally would, which would be like through the rising signs of of astrology. Instead, I'm going to talk about it through the lens of our human design profiles, because I think that is even more beneficial for us as we move into this, because it just affects the way that we approach the world and make decisions and all the things. So I'm going to go through all 12 profiles. I even have my notes so I don't forget anyone. And if, aligning your life and your business and your relationships with your human design and your astrology is up your alley, then this episode is for sure for you. So listen in. Astrologically, we just had a really big transit. And that transit is the North Node, the karmic North Node shifting into Pisces. Now, if you're newer to astrology and all you have is the CoStar app, and all you know is your sun sign and maybe your rising and moon sign, and you're like, what the heck is a North Node? I'm going to explain it to you. So the North Node in astrology is our karmic destiny. So we all have a personal North Node. If you look at your astrology natal chart, it looks like the upside down U with the little squiggles on the end of it, like a cursive upside down U. That's your North Node in your chart. And then your South Node is the U that looks like a cursive U. So it's opposite the North Node in your chart. And we all have a North Node and we all have a South Node. And the South Node is kind of more the lessons that you came into this life. If we imagine our life or every life that we come into, I believe in multiple lives, multiple parallel timelines, all the things. But if we come into this version of our life. So I always think about it like a video game. This time when we entered the video game, we came with certain skills based on what we had done in a previous level or a previous life. That's your South Node. So the South Node embodies lessons that you've already mastered, things that you already are skilled at. The North Node is everything that you're meant to learn in this life and the path that you're meant to go on. And you do that through the rest of your chart. But the North Node for the collective, because the collective that has a North Node as well, and the collective North Node has been in Aries for the last year and a half. It is shifting and has shifted January 11th into Pisces, because it always shifts back a sign, and the South Node has shifted from Libra to Virgo. This is going to be a huge shift, and you're already feeling it. So even if you're not a deep dive astrology girly like me, you've definitely felt like you're coming to the end of a cycle, right? I had this conversation in my Scale to 6 Accelerator a couple weeks ago, and we talked about how I said, even if you don't know what a North Node is, you feel that you're getting ready for something new. You feel like you're at the end of a cycle, you're nearing completion on something. That is the energy of the North Node moving. And so I started to think about it, because obviously, I don't just do human design. I also do astrology, and I look at gene keys and numerology, and numerology is something I'm newer at, but it all is connected to me. And so I started to think about it, because I am a 6-2 in human design. I'm a 6-2 generator. Also, what's crazy is my natal North Node is in Pisces. So as the karmic North Node shifts into Pisces, my natal North Node. So in my birth chart, my North Node is Pisces. So for the next year and a half, I am aligned with the karmic North Node, and it's just going to be a really beautiful time of creation, because it's happening in my 5th house, and Virgo is my 11th house. So I'm on kind of that 5-11 house axis. 5th house is all about creativity, magnetism, personal magnetism, fun, spontaneity, joy. It's the house of all of that. The 11th house is all about friendships, networks, communities, who you're surrounding yourself with, in business and professionally. So I imagine the next year and a half in my life is going to be a year of massive creativity and a lot of really big like gains in my social network, popularity, reputation, etc. So stay tuned. LOL, I hope so. But where it falls for you, it could vary. So if I'm going to talk about the human design profiles because there's a reason why I'm going to do that. But the reason why I wanted to talk about the human design profiles is because we could talk about rising sign and how it's going to affect you every day. But I also I don't want to be the astrology teacher that's like, you can't actually figure out how to read a chart without me. Like, I want to empower you to know how to look at your natal chart. So what I would want you to do, in addition to listening to this episode, is go look at your natal chart. And I want you to figure out which house Pisces rules for you. And the way to figure out which house Pisces rules for you, if you're not looking at your chart, is whatever your rising sign is, that is, or your ascendant, rising, ascendant, same thing. That is your first house of astrology. So for example, I am a Scorpio rising. So Scorpio rules my first house. Then we go counterclockwise around the wheel. So the first house is Scorpio. What comes after Scorpio season? Sagittarius season, then Capricorn, then Aquarius, then Pisces. So first house, Scorpio. Second house, Sagittarius. Third house, Capricorn. Fourth house, Aquarius. Fifth house, Pisces. So whatever your rising sign is, just go in order around the wheel until you get to Pisces. And then that's going to tell you what house Pisces rules for you. And then quick Google search is going to tell you what each house means. Like if you just look up what are the themes of each house of astrology, it's going to tell you. So that's going to give you even more clarity as to where to put your focus. What's going to shift for you over the next year and a half is based on what house Pisces and then Virgo, which is opposite, rules for you. So do that after you listen to this. After I tell you about your human design profile and like kind of the energy that you're moving from and toward, then you can go even deeper and look at your astrology chart and be like, oh, okay, Pisces rules my 7th house. So that's partnerships. Oh, okay. And then Virgo rules I'm a Virgo rising. So that's my first house. Oh, okay. So like themes of self and like how I grow myself and how I grow my relationships. Like that's the theme over the next year and a half. Okay, cool, great. And then we apply your human design profile to it. So you're gonna do a little bit. It's gonna be a group effort. It's gonna be a team project. It's gonna be a group project. You're gonna do some part of it. I'm gonna do some part of it for you. Okay, so let's go into the profiles. I'm going to go through each one. I literally wrote notes because one time I did this and I forgot a whole sign. And I feel so bad about that still. I don't even remember what episode that was or what sign I forgot, but I know I did it and I feel bad. So I'm literally having my notes in front of me and I'm going to go through each one. So let's talk first about my 1 line. So my 1-3s and my 1-4s. Okay. Now, my 1-3s, you are my investigators. Okay. And you're part investigator, they call it martyr. I don't love that because martyr always has a bad connotation, but maybe we just need to change the definition of it. Martyr simply means like no one's going to tell you to take their word for it and you're going to listen to them. Like you have to figure it out for yourself. That's part of why you're here, is to like have a trial and error phase. You're here to try things and pivot, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work, and then like teach us, right? Like that's what you're here to do. So my 1-3 is like you learn about things, you go do them, you decide if they work. And that energy is so powerful and so cool. Like I love learning from 1-3s because when they're embodied and I can tell that they're really owning their trial and error process and trial and error, right? Like a lot of 1-3s in their lower frequency, you tend to only, and this happened a lot over the last year and a half because the last year and a half, the North Node was in Aries. Aries is a sign, it's the fire sign. It's the leadership sign. It's bold. It doesn't like to be wrong. It's very, very set in its ways and it wants to trailblaze. It wants to be first. It wants to know. And we needed that at the time. We needed people, especially like, because this started in 2023. So you think about like coming out of the pandemic, we needed people to lead. Like we actually needed people to like take a step forward and be like, here's what we're going to do. And so that was a really powerful shift when it was happening. Now we don't need that anymore. Now we need more of a creative, intuitive energy. So as I said, the entire collective is shifting from an I trust or an I lead energy to an I trust energy. So for my 1-3s, you've been leading. You've been doing all the things. Like 1-3s have been doing the most over the last year and a half, like the most. We all have, but in our own way. But 1-3s, you've been learning a lot. You've been trying a lot of things. I attract a lot of 1-3 clients. So I have a lot of 1-3 clients. And a lot of my 1-3 clients, they have tried every different type of offer. They've tried every different type of container. They've tried every different type of pricing. They've tried every different type of email marketing. Like they've tried a lot. They've tried different modes of healing, astrology, Reiki, like tapping, EFT, or tapping EFT is the same thing. They've tried a lot of different things, and they've seen what works. And that was really powerful. And there was a lot of trial, right? Because Aries energy doesn't like to be wrong, I think a lot of 1-3s over the last year and a half have done a lot of trial, but they've been a little bit insecure about their failures. And you have to remember that as a 1-3, you are here to try, you are here to win, but you are also here to fail. Because the more you fail, the more you get clear on what is actually the truth. And so I think a lot of 1-3s have tried a lot of things over the last couple of years, but then haven't necessarily failed very gracefully. And so what this looked like is, there was a lot of like bold pursuit happening. And that usually leads to pressure. Like when there's a lot of like bold pursuit of knowledge and like you're like boldly pursuing knowledge and you're boldly pursuing action, there can be a feeling of pressure to kind of like be the leader or be the one in charge. And so there might have been a little bit of like, not in the beginning, because in the beginning that energy was really, really cool. But towards the end of a cycle, you're kind of like, okay, I'm tired of like being the one in charge all the time. Like I'm tired of like actually being the one all the time. So there may have been a lot of risk taking for sure. But sometimes those risks you took as a 1-3 may have actually been a little bit rushed and maybe didn't quite pan out the way you wanted them to, which that's because you rushed them without like doing the deep dive first, which is also what you're here to do. Is you're an investigator, you're a researcher. So I think there was probably like a little bit of that happening. So there may have been like an over-reliance on logic and like, does this make sense? Right? Because that's Aries. Like it likes to know the how, it likes to know what it's doing. And if it doesn't, it like kind of freaks out. So with that 1-3 profile, I think as you move into this Pisces North Node, it's going to be a lot less over planning and a lot more embracing the unknown. I have a client who's a 1-3, and she always used to like pride herself on like, I have all my emails planned for the next 6 months, or I have all my social media content batched and ready to go for the next 6 months. But what that does is it kept her from like evolving the way that she wanted to, because she's like, well, no, but I already have a plan, so I have to stick to the plan. And I think what Pisces is asking you to do as a 1-3 is to like kind of like fuck the plan a little bit, like throw the plan out the window and like see what happens, right? Trust that you have enough knowledge and that you have enough experience to like know what's good for you and what's not, but also like don't be over rigid when it comes to your planning. Don't be over rigid when it comes to like, knowing if it's January, like exactly what you're launching in December, and like that it's not open for discussion. Like let it be open for discussion. Not maybe with other people, but like for sure with yourself. Like if you become a different version of yourself and you're like, I kind of want to do something else, like allow that to happen. So, and I really think this is because Pisces is a sign that really calls for, releasing the rigid structures, releasing the have tos and the need tos, and then embracing more of like an inner guidance, embracing not knowing everything. And I think that's going to be really powerful for a 1-3. There's going to have to be some spiritual connection made. I think 1-3s are going to dive deeper into their spirituality over the next couple years with Pisces, because Pisces rules your subconscious mind. It rules dreams. It rules our delusion. It rules the things you can't see. So as a 1-3, you're really going to have to honor that, and you're going to have to step into leading and moving through things, even when you don't know how it's going to end up. And I know that that's really hard for a 1-3. So spend less time obsessing over perfection, and more time following your intuitive pings. I think that's going to be really helpful for you as a 1-3. engaging in introspective and creative pursuits instead of just the logical ones. Because 1/3s really lean into logic a lot, but embrace more of the intuitive pursuit. So like things that like maybe don't make sense on paper, maybe things that like don't like obviously look like they're going to grow your business, but like they could. And maybe I'm going to just try it out. Like I think that's going to be really helpful for you. And then accept 1/3s. This is a big one. Accept that like not all of your quote, mistakes over the last couple of years need fixing. You don't have to fix everything all the time. And I think that's going to be a really big thing that's going to happen to you over the next year and a half, which will be really great. So you can go deeper into this by knowing what house Pisces and Virgo rules for you. So you kind of know the themes that you're working with. But that is my overall advice for a 1/3. So now let's go on to the 1/4s. 1/4s are similar because you're a 1, so you are an investigator and you're a researcher, but you're also a 4 line. So it's all about people and the connections you make. And 4s are very natural salespeople. They're very natural connectors. They're very natural at like, they're directors in a sense, right? So with Aries fueling that, there was a lot of assertively finding your networks. Like you are intentionally putting yourself in the rooms that you want to be in so that you can meet the right people. It was a lot of assertiveness. It was a lot of seeking out, going out and seeking relationships that aligned with your personal growth and aligned with your ambitions. I think a lot of 1/4s probably focused really hard on being right versus being open, and probably figured out a lot about boundaries when it came to people over the last year and a half. You probably learned how to set a lot of boundaries. You probably learned how to stand up for yourself a lot more, which is great. But there could have been this pressure to lead or this pressure to initiate within relationships. And this could be like romantic relationships, friend relationships, business relationships. There could have been this like pressure to initiate or like a pressure to lead, even if you like didn't necessarily want to. Could have caused a little bit of tension, could have caused a little bit of burnout here at the end. And then you may have like aggressively pursued opportunities. So instead of like kind of letting opportunities come to you, you went out and found them, which needed to happen. But, when we do too much of that, you can kind of struggle. And you probably did struggle to maybe maintain some balance and maybe maintain self-focus. And then that kind of mess with your need for natural connection, because the 4 line is all about natural connection, not forced connections. You may have overestimated your time, your ability to control relationships. You may have overestimated that a little bit, and you could have burnt out a little bit. You could have gotten overstimulated by people, by like all of the like aggressively seeking out people that you did. That could have burnt you out a little bit. So with Pisces, what you're being asked to do is actually like move into more of an intuitive flow with your connections, which actually is going to feel so good for you, 1/4s. It's going to feel so good for you because you're going to be like, the right people are going to come to me. And that's kind of how you're meant to be anyway. And that's your natural nature. So trusting the flow in relationships, that not every relationship needs to like serve like some deep purpose. Like a relationship can just be fun. Like you can have more fun in your relationships. Prioritizing emotional depth over transactional surface level networking. So over the last year, you may have done a lot of surface level networking or what felt like surface level networking. And maybe what you're going to start to realize is a little bit more of depth in your relationship. So you may have less connections, but those connections you do have will go even deeper, which will feel really, really good for you. I think there's gonna be a lot of healing through community for you over the next couple of years, because your 4 line, that 4 line, it thrives in community. It thrives in networks. It thrives on relationships. Like it really, really does. And when the North Node shifts into Pisces, what that means is you're now encouraged to create very deep and very soulful, compassionate connections that kind of strive for more of like community instead of like a utilitarian purpose. And then I think what's going to happen for you 1/4s is there'll be a lot of balancing or harmonizing between your inner and your outer worlds. So you'll spend equal time now focusing on your inner spiritual growth as well as your external networks, where in the past year and a half, maybe you focused more on like externally what was happening. So I think you're going to be able to take that back inside and really focus on your own spiritual growth, which is only going to make you more magnetic to the right people. So it's going to be a really fun time for you, kind of releasing that like perfectionism that maybe you've had in the past couple years, and really trusting the more intuitive flow with your relationships. I think that's going to be really powerful for you, 1/4. So again, look at where Pisces is in your chart to go even deeper into the themes associated with the house that the Pisces and Virgo sit on. But let's go on to our 2 lines. So 2 lines, my 2 4s, I'll start with. I think 2 4s over the last year and a half have really pushed themselves out of their hermit mode. And like 2 4s need to spend a lot of time alone cultivating their genius. Like I'm a 6/2, and so I have a 2 line in my profile, and I really understand this. But 2 4s, like you're meant to be alone a lot, and not like lonely, but like alone to cultivate your genius without too much influence from the outside world. And I think in the last year and a half, because Aries is all about like leadership, you've really forced yourself to be out the house. And you've really forced yourself to like take like bold, visible action, like to be seen, which could be feeling forced. It could be more, you could have felt more like publicly assertive than you prefer to feel, which you needed that because like it was time to get your voice out there, and Aries is all about like getting your voice heard and like being seen and being heard and being bold. And maybe before that you were like hiding, maybe if you have a business, you were like hiding it, or like, you weren't letting people know that like you were the one for them. And maybe the last year and a half, you've really been putting yourself out there, but like almost to your detriment, like to the point where you're like, hey, I need to go spend time alone now. I think probably what you did was you leveraged your community for opportunities, but then on the back end of that, you may have struggled with feeling, I don't know, overexposed or drained by the constant push to do more. So there could have been this like trying to keep up with the algorithm or trying to keep up with people because you like forced yourself into their communities, and you're like, because you're a 2 line, so you're like the hermit, but you're also like the 4 line, which is like the people person. So there's always this juxtaposition to you between like, do I stay in? Do I go out? Like, who do I want to be today? And I think probably over the last year and a half, you've been very out. Like you've been out the house, you've been visible, you've been putting yourself out on social media, you've been putting yourself out in relationships, you've been doing a lot of outward energy. And I think it's just time for you to like pull it back in, like reel it back in, which again is going to feel so good for you. I always think of 2 lines as like a water sign. Like you're a little bit more of a water sign in nature. And so Pisces, you're going to feel very at home in Pisces energy because it's embracing quiet wisdom, right? It's embracing your hermit side. It's really learning to trust that retreating is how you grow spiritually. It is how you become a better version of yourself. And if you're not allowing yourself to retreat and you're not allowing yourself into your hermit mode, then you're actually like, you're doing the opposite of how your natural rhythm prefers to be. And I think you're going to find more alignment in your relationships in the next couple of years. And you're going to do this because you're going to lean into emotional connection rather than networking for opportunity. So an example of this is like maybe the events that you'd go out to were like networking events, and like, different areas or different opportunities for you to like meet potential business partners or meet potential collaborators. And that's fine, but like your battery doesn't always want to be out of the house, but you kind of like spent a lot of your battery on things that drained you, where I think in the next year and a half, you're really going to lean more into like, you're going out of the house very intentionally. And I don't mean like, obviously I don't just mean like physically like going out, but I mean like putting yourself out there more intentionally instead of just like, here I am world, like come and get me, right? I think you also need to let go of your need to like that need you have to prove your value to people, and instead trust in these gifts and trust that like attracts like, and you're going to attract the right opportunities when you're truly being yourself. And I think Pisces energy is way more natural for you. I think that's going to feel that's going to feel really, really good to you, 2-4. So a little less like forcing yourself to be out and visible, and a little bit more like trusting that like all of that work you put in over the last year and a half is going to pay off. And you can now like really, really marinate in this natural urge you have to retreat and work on yourself and then emerge when you're ready, and then rinse and repeat. So, okay, let's go on to 2-5s. The hermit meets like the heretic, right? Like it's this mix of like being alone and like hermiting and like the natural at things, and then like the savior, right? The save the day energy. There's this balance between that. So during Aries season, or during Aries North Node season, you probably really felt the weight of others' projections, because 5-2s and 2-5s, you're a double projection. So you feel everything. You feel everyone's energy, you feel every projection around you. And I think during Aries, while everyone had this like, I lead energy, and it's like this bold, action-oriented energy, you probably felt the weight of those projections like tenfold. And you probably felt that everybody expected you to be a trailblazer, a leader. And what probably happened is it pushed you into maybe like managerial roles or leadership roles that maybe you didn't like necessarily want fully, but like you did them because you like took on the projections of the people around you. There could have been a lot of risks taken during the Aries North Node transit to fulfill like external demands, which could have left you feeling a little bit drained and a little bit like disillusioned by the need to like deliver results, right? Like you could have really put yourself into this like, well, I have to be the one energy, when like you didn't really have to be, but you stepped into that willingly because you felt the projections of other people. And so this could have helped, like really made it so that you struggled. I don't know. I feel like a lot of 2-5s really struggled with like balancing your natural inclination towards solitude with like the Aries kind of fiery demands of external action and visibility being seen. Like I feel like that we really struggled with that over the last year and a half. So as we move into Pisces season, again, I think it's going to feel a lot better. You're going to release the pressure a lot more of meeting external expectations, and then trusting that your own spiritual process and retreat of renewal. Like you're going to trust in that more. Like I need to retreat, I need to process, I need to observe. And then when I'm ready, I will come out and like lead and share and do whatever I'm here to do. But also remember to lead by example during the Pisces North Node transit, my 2-5s, and allow for quiet confidence, quiet intuition to inspire people without needing to like overextend yourself. Like you really don't have to overextend yourself anymore. You've done that. You've put in the sweat equity, and now you get to kind of sit back and like watch it unfold for you. And then embrace the emotional vulnerability of all of this. Compassion. You're so natural at compassion. It's such a natural thing for you. And that's like a key tool for your leadership normally. So compassion without the need to fix people. And I think probably you've been doing a lot more fixing than you maybe prefer during the Aries North Node. And now that it's in Pisces, like I think you're going to lean back more into like empathy without needing to fix everyone. Okay, 3 lines. Halfway through, here we go. My 3 lines, my 3-5s and my 3-6s. 3-5s during the Aries North Node, I think you probably embraced like a lot of action. You tried a lot of things. And remember, as a 3-5, you're here to live life on the front lines and then report back to us. So there is this quality to you where like you try the things and then you tell us how it goes. And I think 3-5s already have a very fiery energy. So you were probably like very at home in that energy. Like, oh, okay, we need leaders. No problem. I'm a trailblazer. I'm a leader. Here I go. Watch me work. And you embraced this like bold kind of trial by fire, pushing yourself and pushing your own boundaries to prove your capabilities, to prove how capable you were. I have a friend and a client who is a 3-5, and over the last year and a half, she has tried 95 freebies. She's figured out how to be very visible on social media. She's gone viral like 1 million times. And I don't mean like 1 million views. I mean like some of her stuff has like 50 million views. Like we're talking viral, viral. And she has added so many people to her email list and all these things. She's tried so many things. I think she felt compelled to do this because she was gaining so much success on social media. She was feeling compelled to take risks and like figuring it out so she could report back. But then what happens is like you get a little burnt out. So I think 3/5s got a little burnt out because you were trying all these things and you were trying to like learn and report back, do and report back without actually integrating anything and feeling the fruits of your labor. Like, I really think that that's what happened. And I think a lot of you acted very independently, and that was sometimes to the detriment of collaboration or deep emotional connection. So I think a lot of 3/5s maybe pushed away their friends a little bit in the last couple of years, or pushed away collaborators that like wanted to work with you. You maybe pushed them away because you were like, no, I have to figure this out. Like, I'm at work, I have to figure this out. And so that probably like burnt you out a little bit. And like, you're probably feeling now that Pisces is like the North Node is moving into Pisces. You're probably like, I need a freaking break. Like, I need for this to just work. Right. So I urge you to trust that all of these quote mistakes that you think you've made are really divinely guided, and they are true like steps toward wisdom. And I think you're being asked to release the need to like overanalyze your mistakes. Similar to 1/3s, like you don't need to like overanalyze this very much. Like, you pivoted, you learned a lot. You now know what you want to do and probably what you don't want to do, or you're really close to it, or you're a lot clearer on it. You don't need to go back and like rehash everything that went wrong and be like, oh my God, like I could have made so much more money if I would have just figured that out sooner. Like, you weren't meant to back then. You were meant to go through this process, and you were meant to figure it out along the way. And I think when you do this, and then you also like lead through emotional depth and compassion. So whatever you've learned over the last year and a half, like go teach it to someone and like do it deep, and do it for the emotional connection of letting people know that like you really see them and like they're not alone. And then recognize that like your role in all of this is to inspire others through your own authenticity rather than inspiring people through perfection. Right. So all these like mistakes that you made, or all these pivots that you've made over the last year and a half while you've just been like pedal to the metal, give yourself the space to be like, hey, guess what? I tried all these things. Here's what didn't work. Because again, you're supposed to like live life on the front lines and then report back to us. Let us know what worked and let us know what didn't, without the need to be perfect, because like we don't expect you to be perfect. And when you release the need to be perfect, that's when your magic really shines, and like it just, things come to you effortlessly. Okay, my 3/6s. Here we go. Similar to a 3/5, you are a 3. So you trial and you error. Like you learn things, you develop wisdom, you teach them. Like that's what you do. And so I think during the Aries energy, you took a lot of bold risks. You really proved your role as a leader. You really did a lot of things to prove your role as a leader. You may have tried new relationships. You may have tried on new ideas. You may have done different approaches to leadership that maybe we haven't seen. But I also think there was probably this like pressure for quick success. Like, oh, I figured this out. Now why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And I think as 3/6s, like you had a lot of these like breakthroughs over the last year and a half, but then you were like, but why can't I just turn around and teach this? Like there was just a lot of self-induced pressure to achieve quick success or embody the wisdom before you were ready to embody the wisdom. It's like you learned something, but you're right in the middle of your Saturn return. So like whatever wisdom is being embodied, it's not going to happen for a few more years. And like, that's okay. So which caused you to like lead with more frustration and impatience with your own growth process. And that was like never meant to be. And so this probably happened though because you prioritized your independence. You prioritized action over emotional or spiritual integration. So like you probably prioritize like, oh, I learned that. Now I have to go teach it. When what you actually need to do was like, oh, I learned that. My brain learned that. Now I need to let my body embody that and catch up to that, which is going to happen for you during Pisces North Node era. My 3/6s. You're going to embrace, I think what's going to happen is a lot of you are going to embrace the kind of like non-linear nature of your growth. So like, I learned it cerebrally, and then it took me another year to embody it on a physical level. That is okay. Really learning to trust that and trust that you're going to naturally step into your role model phase with time, but also with experience. And there's a big difference between knowing something and embodying something. And I think that is what you're really going to really understand in the next year and a half. I think you're going to really step into that energy versus like, oh, I learned it, I got to teach it, I got to figure out a way to teach it, or like, why isn't it, I've learned it, why haven't I embodied it, or why hasn't this happened? And then you get frustrated, and like, that's not how you're meant to feel. I want you to find peace during the Pisces North Node, to surrender to the unknown. So really allow your intuition and spiritual guidance to shape your journey. Like, really allow that. Don't worry so much about everything that you know. Focus on living. Focus on joy. Focus on your spiritual growth. And then lead with emotional wisdom. Right? So showing others that true leadership comes from authenticity and alignment rather than force, right? So it's okay if you're like, I actually learned this cerebrally and I'm still implementing this into my own physical body. And here's how that's feeling for me right now. Like, leading with that energy versus I've learned this and now I've done it and now you get to do it. That's coming. Remember, the 6th line embodies wisdom until we're like we're learning and we're observing and we're trialing and erroring until we're like 50. So before then, trust the timing, trust the process. You're going to step into your natural role as a wisdom, as a wise sage, as a role model. You're going to step into that in time, but with experience. It has to come with experience. Okay. So now my 4 lines. 4-1. We did 1-4. This is just the opposite. So there's more of an emphasis on networks for you than your research. It's just the opposite energy. So again, you probably aggressively pursued relationships and knowledge over the last year and a half since 2023, and you probably focused on building a network that aligned with your ambitions. So if you got in the best shape of your life and you're like, well, all of my friends now need to be really ambitious towards their fitness goals also. And you like really probably shape-shifted into a new friend group over I imagine that you probably like have a new friend group than you did in 2020. And maybe you felt compelled to take on kind of a leadership role within that community. Maybe you often acted as the expert or the authority on things because you do have a lot of knowledge. And so maybe this like group, maybe you developed like a community of minions over the last year and a half. And this is probably because what you did was you prioritize. And I think Aries kind of pushes us to prioritize control, and it prioritizes structure in relationships. And then that like guarantees like a sense of certainty. Like, I will continue to stay with my goals if I align myself with a community that is working on the same type of goals. Then we're all doing it together, and then we're all just going to get into the best shape of our life. Right? Or like, I had a spiritual awakening, and so now like all my friends have to be on the same spiritual path. And if they're not, then I may not like stick to my goals as much. And so sticking with friends that like only with people, like putting yourself in friend groups that like only were like spiritual, then it enforced like certainty for you. And I think there's like a rigidity to that like you're a 4 line, like you're meant to be very intuitive with your relationships, and like not everybody needs to be like on the same page as you and like on the same like health kick as you in order for you to continue. And actually like the diversity in your friend circles is pretty powerful when you allow it to be. And so I think with this Pisces North Node transit for ones, letting go of the need to control the outcome of your relationships, trusting that divine timing will bring you the right connections, right? So like, I'm only going to hang out with people that, get up at 5 a.m. and work out every day because that's how I'm going to continue to do that. Well, no, like I'm going to continue to do that. And like, if I have a friend that doesn't want to do that, like that's okay too, as long as like, we have mutual respect for each other. And like, I'm just going to trust that like the right people are always going to find me. And then focusing on emotional and spiritual depth instead of transactional surface level relationships. So very similar to a 1-4 here. You may have been focused more on transactional or like surface level relationships. And what you're going to be really called to do during Pisces season is like the opposite of that. Like you really want to be focused on like emotional depth and like spiritual connections with people. And then balance. Okay, so this is where you get to balance your like 1 and your 4. So you're going to balance your investigative tendencies, which actually are very Virgo energy, right? Like detail oriented, lots of details, lots of research. You're going to balance that with the trust of your intuition, which is going to allow this kind of like inner knowing, this inner voice, inner guidance to inform your decisions. So yes, you have investigative tendencies. You like to know the outcome. You like to know how. But do you always need to know how for this specific thing, or can we rely on our knowledge from something similar in the past to guide us intuitively into this new thing? That is what I would really love to see you focus on for once, because it'll just make your relationship so much deeper, and it's just going to feel so much better for you because you really do better when you have like emotional, spiritual friendships and connections. Okay, 4-6s, part 4, part opportunist and friend, like, connector, part role model and wise one. So I imagine with Aries North Node since 2023, you've really maybe stepped into visible leadership roles. You've probably taken risks and you've built a lot of community. You've expanded your community through your own risk taking and you've become more visible. You've let more people see you. And maybe you've prioritized like external success and recognition for this versus, and maybe sometimes at the expense of your own emotional fulfillment. So like you've checked a lot of boxes over the last few years or couple years. You've checked a lot of boxes and like maybe emotionally you're not feeling as like fulfilled as you'd like to feel, which is good because that's why Pisces season is here. And there may have been a more self-focused approach, which I think was necessary, like focusing on what you need and who you're becoming, and showing others what's possible. So you've been building a lot of authority and leadership with the people in your life. And as you step into this Pisces era, I think you're going to want to lead a lot more with compassion and like emotional resonance. So like really resonating with people, really sharing more of yourself. And that's going to give you more soulful connections in your community and like the people that you're here to guide and like the people that you are a role model for. It's going to feel a lot less transactional and a lot more emotionally deep and spiritual when you do that. Also, trusting that your wisdom is naturally attracting the right people, right? Like you don't have to prove that you're wise anymore. Like you are wise and we know that. And the right people, when they need your wisdom, they're going to come to you. And so you don't have to force that. Pisces is going to really help you remember that. Pisces is also going to help you embrace the spiritual aspects of what it means to be a role model. So are you actually going to go out and be a role model by like telling everybody I am a role model? Or are you going to trust the intuitive gifts that you have and like understand that the right people are going to find you no matter what? Because that's really more how you're meant to function. Yeah. Okay. 5 lines. 5 ones. I love a 5-1. You're so brilliant. You're just like really smart. And in the last year and a half, again, you've felt the weight of other people's projections. So you've felt what needs to happen and you've probably taken a lot of really big action to like be the person who can like see that. Like, oh, this is what we need. I'm going to go and do it. There's been a lot of that energy. I think maybe a lot of you have become managers. You've become leaders in your work, in your work circles, in your friend groups. You've become a leader because people naturally know that you can solve problems really well. So you've probably taken on the role of like community problem solver, either at work or in your family or with your friends, which is fine. But this energy also makes it so that you kind of like, you aggressively pursued knowledge and expertise so that you could reinforce your sense of authority. Like the more that you know, the more like authority people will see you with. And that could give you a little bit of burnout. That could make you a little bit like dysregulated, I think. So there could have been a focus on like practical, immediate solutions, which when we only focus on what's practical and what's immediate and what we can achieve right now, we tend to lose like the emotional or the spiritual dimension of challenges. So like, what's the bigger picture here? So maybe you've missed the bigger picture a few times in the last couple of years, which is fine. Pisces is here to save the day. When Pisces, now with the Pisces is in, or the North Node is in Pisces, you don't need to fix everything. And I think that's going to become abundantly clear to you. You're not going to have to fix everything. Some issues actually just require spiritual surrender. Like sometimes you actually just need to be like, let go and let God, right? Like Jesus, take the wheel. Like this is not my problem. I'm going to let somebody else fix this. And like, that's okay. I think that's going to be a really big deal for you in the next year and a half, my 5-1s. Release the pressure to meet everyone's expectations. Because a lot of those people's expectations are not actually other people's expectations. They're actually just like your expectations that you've like projected onto people and then they've projected them back to you. So you don't actually like need to, like that doesn't actually need to happen. You don't need to like meet all of those criteria. You can focus on emotional connection. You can focus on intuition. You can focus on your leadership tools and people will naturally see you in that way, right? And then you can allow this like investigative foundation. You've done a lot of research over the last year and a half. Like since 2023, you've learned a lot of things. You've probably taken a lot of courses. You've probably taken a lot of you've worked with a lot of like mentors, or maybe you've worked with one mentor consistently. I have a client who's a 5-1. She's a 5-1 manifestor, and I freaking love this girl. And she has been with me literally for the last year and a half. Like I would bet that she found me like right as the Aries North Node happened. And now she's kind of like settling into this like natural leader that she is. And she's learned so much. So she's ready to go and like be this leader, but from a very intuitive place versus like, oh, I'm learning, so I have to be the leader, right? So she's taking on a lot less projections now. And I think that this is just really par for the course for you 5-1s. Releasing the pressure, not trying to solve everything, allowing your intuition to really take hold now. And then also like boundaries, like you have that 5 line. So you have a lot of projection. People look for leaders, but remember, we're moving from a collective I lead to a collective I trust frequency. So a lot more people are going to start to trust themselves, and they're going to do that better when you're trusting yourself. Okay, finally, 5-2s, and then we're moving on to our 6 lines, and then we are finished. So 5-2s, you have also taken a lot of action. You've done a lot of external things. Remember that 2 line likes to be alone, and it likes to be a hermit, and you probably haven't been a hermit very much in the last year and a half, which I have a 2 line, and I understand that so well. We've been out the house a lot. And because of that, because you've been out the house, it's like when a 2 line steps out, people are like, oh, you're here. Okay, well then you be in charge. Have you ever like gone to a party and like you weren't the one planning it, but like you're really good at planning parties, and then you get there and everyone's like, well, what do you think we should do? And then you end up like planning the party anyway. Or you end up like managing the party, even though like you weren't supposed to do that. You were just invited. Like, I feel like that's a 2 line. That's a 5-2, especially. Like you've been out the house a lot and you've been trying to prove how good you are at leading a lot over the last year and a half, which is good because 2 lines can hide, and we can hide our genius, and we don't always know our genius very well. We don't always know what we're really good at. And we have a lot of blind spots in that. So I think we needed to come out. We needed to show people how good we were at things. But that can, for 5-2s, that can lead to a lot of like dysregulation in our nervous system. It can really be a struggle, I think, for you to balance that like need to be alone with like that Aries energy of like bold, visible, be visible, be bold, be front and center. And maybe you've solved a lot of practical problems over the last year and a half, and you've maybe ignored or neglected your own emotional or spiritual needs. So I think Pisces North Node is going to remind you that like your spiritual and your own emotional needs are really important. And you can't be the leader that people want you to be and that you're quite frankly here to be unless you're taking care of yourself on an emotional and spiritual level. Okay, so I really want you to like move into that, embrace quiet leadership. Trust your intuitive wisdom is going to resonate without you needing to, I don't know, overextend yourself or, show up every single day on social media to prove it. Maybe let go of meeting other people's demands and focus on your own inner peace. That's what Pisces is really going to ask you to do, is focus on your own inner peace. It's also going to remind you to lead through vulnerability. So if you have burnt out, if you have drained your battery trying to be available to everybody, maybe share that. Like maybe that's something that you share to remind people to get in touch with their own emotional selves and pay attention to their own emotional and spiritual needs. Okay, 6 lines. Here we go. 6-2s, I am you, you are me, I'm a 6-2. And during the Aries North Node era, us 6-2s, we were, again, very out the house. Like we were trying very hard and doing a lot of things to prove how smart we were, how much of an authority we were. I know for me, I hired a social media manager and we posted on social media 5 days a week. I was in my stories every single day, proving, like showing my authority. I was putting out educational content because my goal was show people what you know. And I did that. I did that very, very well. And at this point, if you know me, if you follow me, you know that I know my shit and I know what I'm talking about. Like there is no question of that, I think, anymore. So I did my job and I'm tired. And I now like kind of want to like leave. And what happens is like, I think what happened to us too is by doing that, we kind of like reattached ourselves to a lot of that emotion, that like search for external validation that maybe we had worked to release. And maybe it came back a little bit over the last 1.5 years, because I know for me, this showed up with like my phone and social media. I was like very on social media. And then I kind of used social media as like, or like my phone as like a coping mechanism to like make sure that like people knew that I was smart. But like I never needed to do that. But like I did need to do that because before that, I was kind of sleeping on my gifts and sleeping on how wise I actually was. And like, because I've had the life experiences to back it up. So I was sleeping on it. And so Aries North Node era really pushed me into like my daily routines, and Aries is my 6th house. So that's all about like daily routines and making sure that I have discipline and structure. And I had a lot of that. Like we had a schedule for posting. I was very active. I was very front and center. And I think what Pisces is really going to remind us to do is like, we don't have to be so on all the time. And it's actually okay if we disappear off social media for a little while, and we don't have to be showing up like so front and center. We don't have to prove ourselves. We don't have to get external validation for us to know that we are role models. And then also trusting the timing of that, right? 6 lines, 3 phases. Like I know I'm in that second phase, that 30 to 50 phase, where I'm doing a lot of observation. I'm learning a lot still. And I have to trust the timing of my role model phase. And it was so helpful for me to watch the Martha Stewart documentary because she's a 6-2. And it was really, really great for me to like watch that, because I was like, oh yeah, she got more wise as she got older, and like she didn't need to try to like prove that to as many people as when she was younger. And I think a lot of us tried to do that. So, less focusing on external validation during the next 1.5 years, more time alone. Trusting the unfolding of our journey, I think, is going to be really big for us, and trusting that like true leadership emerges naturally over time, not by force. Embracing spiritual surrender. I'm going on like a deep spiritual, I am right smack dab in the middle of a very deep spiritual awakening. Like I can't even imagine what it's been like to live with me over the last 1.5 years, because I've just been so focused on like, oh my gosh, well, if this happened, then this has to, and I just went so deep. I was just like constantly like down a rabbit hole of like, well, what does it mean? And that kind of like it stops us from playing. Like it stopped me from really like just like letting it just be. And so I think 6/2s, what we're really stepping into in this next year and a half is like our it's not that serious era. Like things can happen and they can just be fun without there being like a deeper meaning for like why it's fun, right? Like I had like this perfect example of like how deep I go is like my son and his dad and I went out to dinner like a couple weeks ago, and it was like so fun, and it was just like playful and fun, and like my son loved it because like what kid whose parents aren't together get to have like dinner with their parents? Like it's rare to get along with like your co-parent and in that way where you can just like hang out. But like afterward I like journaled about it and I was like, oh my God, I healed my inner child because I would have killed for my parents to do this and like they never did, and like I'm healing something so deep inside of me. And it's like I laughed at myself afterward and I'm like, this is not that serious. Like, Danielle, you're being dumb. Like stop. Just enjoy the moment. It's fine. Not every relationship needs to have some deep spiritual meaning. And I'm really looking forward to like that translating into my relationships, like with my wife, with my friends, like just having more fun and like finding more joy without like needing to prove like how wise I am, and letting like wisdom and leadership really like evolve at its own pace over time. So 6/2s, here we go. We're entering our it's not that serious era. Then finally, last but certainly not least, we have our 6/3s. It's the same as the 3/6, just opposite. So that wisdom line you have is first and front and center, and like the trial and error is kind of second. Like you learn through your wisdom. And so you probably tried a lot of new things. You probably had a lot of new ideas. You probably tried a lot of new approaches. You probably tried leadership in a lot of different ways over the last year and a half. You took a lot of risks to prove your worth, which is great. But this can cause a lot of pressure and it can cause a lot of pressure and like pressure to achieve success quickly. Like, oh, I have to learn this fast so I can turn around and teach it. And then you get frustrated with your natural trial and error process, because then you forget that like error and failure, this is a thing for all 3 lines. So if you have a 3 line at all, like I've said this many times during this episode, whether 3 line is like 1-3, 6-3, 3-6, 3-5, if you have a 3 line, the last year and a half, you've done a lot of trial and error, but you've forgotten the error part. Like you've forgotten that is a huge part of it. And a lot of the 3 lines I know, like my wife is one of them, and the amount of self-sabotage that girl had over the last year of like, I fail all the time, like I'm ready to win. Right. But like failure is part of your soul's journey here. You have to fail, because the more you fail, the more wisdom you obtain. And for you 6/3s, that's everything. Like your failures are your wisdom. And without them, you cannot be the role model that you're meant to be. And so prioritizing like quick lessons and quick leadership over emotional connection and like your own spiritual depth has probably made you a little bit resentful and frustrated with your own process and frustrated with yourself, made you feel like maybe there was something wrong with you. And I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. And Pisces North Node era is here to remind you that there's nothing wrong with you. And so what you're going to do over the next year and a half is you're going to embrace your spiritual wisdom. You're going to emerge from your mistakes and your trials. You're going to trust that all of these experiences you've had are serving like a way higher purpose than maybe you even understand right now. You're going to lead through a lot of compassion and a lot of emotional depth. So inspiring others with that authenticity, I think, is going to be really, 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 really big for you. And then find balance between practical action, right, which would be Virgo energy, and then spiritual surrender. So like, I'm learning that I failed. I don't know the lesson yet. I will someday. And when I do, I will share it in my wise, sage way. But for now, I'm just going to accept it, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to pivot without trying to like, what is the reason it? Yeah. Okay. So finally, what I'll say one more time is you now know how it affects your profile. For even more depth to know like where in your chart this is going to affect you most. Like for me, this transit is taking place on my 5th and my 11th house axis. You could be 1st and 7th. It could be 2nd and 8th. It could be 4th and 10th. You have to go and you have to look it up where Pisces rules for you. And then Virgo is opposite that. You have to go and you have to look that up because that's going to give you so much more clarity and it's going to give you even more specificity, which like we're all about it. Because the more you know, the more you can just like let your intuition lead you. But this is a season of intuition. Pisces is a season of intuition. So if you fight against your own intuition, you're going to have a lot harder of a time than it's like if you got like swept down river, right? You get put in a river. And if you're trying to swim against the river, you're going to get really tired really fast. Where if you just like let go and you just float, it's probably going to be a lot more peaceful and you're going to end up where you're meant to end up. And like, that's what Pisces season is asking you to do. It's a water sign. It's asking you to go with the flow, right? It's the end of the zodiac. So it's like releasing all of this rigidity and all of these like things like have tos and shoulds and need tos, and really just surrendering to the spiritual flow of life is going to be so much more powerful for you. And as a collective, that's how we evolve and that's how our consciousness grows. So we're all going to heal our addiction to outside validation. We're going to heal our addiction to praise. We're going to heal our addiction to chaos and struggle. Pisces is going to make sure of that. And I'm excited. So as always, if this is an episode that you really enjoyed, please share it. Tag me. I would love to see what you thought about it. Also, we're really growing this show this year. It's a really big goal for me. I have like so many big goals for this podcast. And the way that we do that is through the algorithm of the podcast. So whether it be Spotify or Apple, if you could go and just leave a review if you love what you hear, like let us know, because the more that you do that, the more that the platforms know to push it out to more people. And that's how we grow the show. So it would be so helpful to me if you did love it to let us know. And we'll be back next week with the start of a new series. And you're really going to like this series because my wife is back on the podcast and we've been going through it over the last couple of months. I would say the last couple of years. We've been really going through it and it all really came to a head recently. And we are going to start a series to kind of like help you break out of it because a lot of relationships are going through a lot of transition right now. And I'm really excited for you to hear what we've been going through and like where we're going next. So make sure you come back next episode and I'll see you then. Love ya. Bye.